But I'm absolutely appalled by the disinformation about what he actually said. It started with a deceptively edited clip this morning and took off like wildfire. He did not call for her to be put in front of a firing squad. That did not happen. Even his most persistent critics, some of them today, have admitted as much. I think this episode, Wolf, to be honest, goes on the ever-expanding bonfire of credibility of the hysterical anti-Trump left. And I think the people pushing this today, honestly, Wolf, are one of the principal reasons I'm going to wind up voting for Trump.
So this whole Liz Cheney thing is already starting to backfire on the mainstream media. By the way, as it always was going to, because Donald Trump never called for Liz Cheney to be shot. That's not what he was saying. He was not talking about a firing squad. We'll give you that story here in a second. But the overall point is that it got so bad that even this columnist who went on CNN and blatantly repeated this lie about it had to issue an official retraction for his comments. The lies are already falling apart. We'll give you the full story here today. But first, folks, do us a big favor. If you enjoy our content, please hit that subscribe button down below. And why should you subscribe? Because we're just a couple days away from the election. It's never been a better time to lock in. And by the way, subscribing also ensures you can join us for our giant election night live stream. It's going to be the biggest, the best live stream they've ever seen. Many are saying, join us, hit that red button, make sure your notifications are on. And with that said, let's start from the top, okay? As you could probably expect, this guy, Jonah Goldberg, who is some type of liberal columnist, went on and repeated the big lie, and then we'll tell you what happened. But first, take a listen.
I don't think you even need to call it fire department. He's saying quite explicitly and unambiguously that Liz Cheney should be shot, should be executed by firing squad. That is appalling. It is a small facet of the reasons why he's unfit for office, and the Republican Party has made a disastrous mistake renominating him. All that said, since we're here for the punditry, I don't know what this gets him, right? If his problem is freaking out suburban women who don't like the chaos, don't like the violent rhetoric and all that kind of stuff, that's just not a great closing argument. Let's execute a political opponent who happens to be a woman because I don't like her. And like, does that pull more low propensity voters in his coalition to the polls? I honestly don't think so.
And I don't blame him for sticking with his daughter, but his daughter's a very dumb individual, very dumb. She's a radical war hawk. Let's put her with a rifle standing there with 9 barrels shooting at her, okay? Let's see how she feels about it. You know, when the guns are trained on her face. You know, they're all war hawks when they're sitting in Washington in a nice building saying, oh, gee, let's send 10,000 troops right into the mouth of the enemy. But she's a stupid person.
Right. So not to sound like a broken record here, but it's just a blatant lie, right? Like Donald Trump never called for Liz Cheney to be executed by firing squad. What he did say is actually a pretty interesting point, which is he was exposing the moral hypocrisy of the neocon warmongers like Liz Cheney, who, you know, endorse sending Americans to go die in all these pointless wars to, I don't know, you know, the whole Dick Cheney thing with Halliburton, let's just say potentially enrich themselves. You can research that if you want. That if they were placed in the position, like, why do they never go to fight the wars themselves? Why do all the people sitting in comfy couches in DC never actually go and join the very fights for democracy or freedom or all the things overseas that they claim are so important for young men of my generation to be sacrificing their lives for? It's honestly a pretty genuine question. It's a point that the left has made repeatedly throughout the years when it came to the Iraq war. And by the way, let me say, they were right, okay? The liberals back in 2003 were right. But the liberals of today think Liz and Dick Cheney are amazing people who, you know, are real patriots for this country. They're standing up for democracy and all of our values. It's like, yeah, okay. But to give you the conclusion of this story, apparently Jonah Goldberg, the guy who went on TV and said this, had to issue a retraction. Okay, and they always do this after the fact. It's funny because why do they do it? Because you're probably going to face a defamation lawsuit, frankly, because that's just something that was never said. But he went out and said that this morning on CNN, I referred to Trump's rifles quote as him advocating a firing squad for Liz Cheney. I was wrong to say he was calling for a firing squad execution. After I said that, my co-panelist Brad Todd told me the case that I was wrong. I let my disgust at Trump's comments get the better of me, as this was the first time I had heard them. So look, I'm not here to offer praise for Jonah Goldberg for walking back and admitting he was wrong, because ultimately he still said it, right? Millions of people are still hearing this type of talk from the mainstream media without retractions. He's probably just trying to save his own skin from the lawsuits. But with that said, right, you are seeing how the big lie is already starting to fall apart. And when it comes to CNN, we also know there's nobody better to do this job than Scott Jennings himself.
I personally think that any fair review of this remark is really simple. He was making a crude, if well-worn argument that often comes from the anti-war left and that I heard repeatedly during the Bush years about politicians who vote to authorize wars being forced to fight in them. It's called the chicken hawk argument. It's been around probably since Vietnam or maybe before. So I actually disagree with the argument. I think it's a bumper sticker way of dealing with complex matters of national security. So here I am, a Republican who disagrees with Trump, but I'm absolutely appalled by the disinformation about what he actually said. It started with a deceptively edited clip this morning and took off like wildfire. He did not call for her to be put in front of a firing squad. That did not happen. Even his most persistent critics, some of them today, have admitted as much. I think this episode, Wolf, to be honest, goes on the ever-expanding bonfire of credibility of the hysterical anti-Trump left. And I think the people pushing this today, honestly, Wolf, are one of the principal reasons I'm going to wind up voting for Trump. I don't like, if you wanted to criticize this man, there's plenty. You do not have to make things up to criticize Donald Trump. And I think some of it, frankly, was spun up to distract from a terrible jobs report, if you want my honest opinion.
Boom. Perfect. Exactly. And I know a lot of people like Scott Jennings because he does a good job often on CNN defending the right-wing argument. But ultimately, he is still basically the token Republican of CNN, right? Try to find some type of establishment guy who can go on the network. Because at the end of the day, as he points out there himself, Scott Jennings worked for George Bush. Okay, he worked for that administration. He has a lot more neocon interventionist tendencies than Trump himself or myself or a lot of America First MAGA people do have. But at least he was willing to be honest about it. At least he was willing to go out and say, look, I disagree with the chicken hawk argument, but that is what he was saying. He was never calling for the execution of Liz Cheney. You know? So at least props to him for doing that. By the way, this is so true right here. This is a tweet from Greg Price who says, when it comes to Biden, right, Trump supporters are garbage. And the media says it's out of context because there was an apostrophe. But when Trump says that Liz Cheney is a war hawk, how would she feel if she was being sent to fight in the war? The media blatantly takes it out of context. Yeah, it's a double standard. Yeah, none of us are exactly surprised by it, but worth noting, right, that it's very true. But with all of that said, despite the fact that this big lie is being widely debunked, even the journalists who are going out and saying it are having to retract their own statements, I regret to inform you that Liz Cheney is not doing any of that. I know it's very surprising, right? She's absolutely milking this. She's absolutely running with this. Take a listen.
Hi, Stan, Bill, Tom, Jeff, and Mary. I just wanted to say hi. We just arrived here in Michigan, and I'm a conservative, been a conservative, my whole life, and I wouldn't be supporting Vice President Harris if I didn't know absolutely that she's the only choice in this race who's going to stand up for the Constitution. I was in the Capitol on January 6th, and if you just look at what President Trump did while the attack was happening, for 3 hours, he refused to tell the mob to leave. And he knew. He was watching the attack on television. That's just one of the examples that we have of just really fundamental cruelty. So I believe so strongly that in this race, fundamental cruelty. What a word. Liz,
would it be inappropriate? No, it's not inappropriate to point out that your father is literally responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people. Okay? Your family, okay, is led by a man. By the way, like to assume there's some type of distance between Dick and Liz Cheney. No, they're totally working hand in hand. They're both endorsing Kamala Harris. They're, lockstep. There's no, I disagree with my father type of thing going on here. So I am certainly going to say you guys are intertwined. That is far from inappropriate to say. Your father, you want to talk about cruelty? Your father started the Iraq war on a lie. Okay, there were no WMDs in Iraq. The Bush administration lied to the American people about it. You sent thousands of American young kids, my age at the time, to die. Okay, you have parents to this day grieving the loss of children they will never get back on this planet Earth. Not to mention, by the way, I mean, we're America first, but also you want to talk about just pure human cruelty. All of the Iraqi civilians who were killed in this bloody and frankly pointless war, because years later, was Iraq ever really so much better than it was under Saddam Hussein? No, absolutely not. And you did that all for what? I mean, there are a number of reasons, but none of them have anything to do with democracy or freedom or human rights or any of that, okay? And chiefly, your father was the former CEO of Halliburton. Halliburton, hence, was afterwards very responsible, basically the chief architect of being tasked to rebuild the countries in the Middle East that we invaded, which did what? Enriched your family. So in other words, you guys as a family built your generational wealth off of sending people to die. And then, more or less, I mean, this is true, plundering their dead bodies for the money. And you're going to stand here and pearl clutch about January 6th and human cruelty. Give me a freaking break. You know what? In retrospect, I hate the fact that, a couple days from the election, we are arguing something this stupid with the mainstream media, and they're doing it for a reason. Yes, they obviously want to hurt Donald Trump. But at the same time, I gotta say, I'm glad this entire quote unquote scandal is happening. Why? Because there's no better way to close out this election cycle than our closing argument being an argument against the neocons, right? All of the endless war supporters have already rallied behind Kamala Harris. But then on top of that, this is gonna be the final discussion, right? Whether or not it's a good thing to send American children to war while the Cheney family gets rich off of it and just, sits on the couch and doesn't do anything. If that's going to be your closing argument to America, let me just say, okay, as a Gen Z voter who just voted today myself, very glad that, this is what we're closing the election on. And very glad, by the way, I voted for Donald Trump, okay, and not the chicken hawk ticket, yes, of Kamala Harris and her new BFF, Liz Cheney, who she's openly campaigned with. And she said Dick Cheney was highly respected and she thanked him for the endorsement. We're not going to be the millennials. Okay, my generation is not going to go to an Iraq War 2.0. And the only way to ensure that doesn't happen is by voting for Donald Trump. So with that said, ladies and gentlemen, let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe if you are new. And until next time, God bless and peace.